Welcome in to the tens of you who might have stumbled upon this video. My name is David. I am the world's worst cinephile, and I want to wish you a happy new year. And I hope that for those of you who make your New Year's resolutions, that you have great success this year in keeping those. One of my New Year's resolutions for this year is that I want to be more active on this channel than I was last year, post some more videos. Last year I uploaded 2 videos, and this year, I'm hoping to make those same 2 videos. So you put those 2 plus this video, I'm already on a great path to shattering last year's record. But yeah, that's my goal for this year, for this channel, is I want to be more active, want to upload more videos, as well as, hopefully as the year goes on, start getting more comfortable in making videos and editing videos and actually putting a little bit more production into the videos, as opposed to this for the first 3 videos I have on this channel of just being one long, unbroken, uncut take. So hopefully we get to that point, and that's where we get a little more comfortable in making videos. But that is the goal for this channel. This time of year, there's everyone kind of, a lot of film YouTubers and TikTokers and whatnot. There's kind of the 2 lists, right, that everyone makes this year, and it's one of them is your most anticipated movies for the upcoming year, and one of them is your favorite or the best movies of the previous year. And so I decided today I want to start with my most anticipated movies for 2024 as the video, mainly because the top 10 of 2023, so I'm not, obviously don't have any, press pass, I'm not seeing any movies early, I'm not, any of that, and so it's a lot of the movies are just whatever I can find, and so there's obviously some films that release later that other people saw at like film festivals and whatnot. So there's a good chunk of films from last year that I just didn't get a chance to see. So I'm kind of pushing that video off for a couple more days, and in hopes that there's a couple more movies I can sneak in and kind of solidify my top 10 list a little bit more, because I would hate to post that video and then tomorrow see a movie that I'm like, oh, that would have made the list, So I'm just trying to give myself a couple more days on that one. So today, I thought it would be a good video to just start talking about my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2024. Every year on my letterbox, I think for the past, 5 years, I guess, maybe, what I do is I make a list and I just put every movie that I have any sort of curiosity in seeing in 2024. Some of them I never end up seeing. It's just whatever the upcoming year, I just put a couple in there, a good chunk. I think right now on the list I have on Letterboxd, I think I'm at 80 and change, something like that, So if you want to see that full list, that link will be in the description below. You can see that whole list. And then what I do is once I gather all of those lists, I pull up my top 10, and those are the ones that I am the most anticipating. So today we'll go over those top 10, and before we get too into it, 10, 9, and 8 have kind of an interesting, not really story, but just I kind of want to explain those 3 on the list a little bit. So in years past, what a kind of a rule I have for my top 10 is if I haven't seen any of the previous films like in that franchise, I tend to not include the upcoming, film in that franchise. So for example, last year, both like Creed 3 and Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, those were 2 films that I'd seen the trailers and I was kind of, anticipating, and I was like, oh, these look really good, but I didn't put them in my top 10 because I hadn't seen any of the Rockies or the Creeds, and I hadn't seen any of the Mission Impossible movies, and so I just didn't put them in the top 10. Now, going forward, I watched all of the Mission Impossibles leading up to Dead Reckoning, and I loved a lot of the films in the Mission Impossible franchise. So going forward, whenever we get Dead Reckoning Part 2 in 2025 or 26 or whenever, we're getting that Part 2, that will be in that year's top 10 for sure. That's a film that I will definitely be anticipating. But just for a rule that I've had for a while is I don't include films in a franchise if I haven't seen any of the other previous films. This year I kind of broke that 3 times with my 10, 9, and 8, and part of it is maybe it's because there's just not as many films in 2024 that I'm super anticipating, but part of it is also just because I think this is a good opportunity to kind of explain my channel, kind of explain the name, The World's Worst Cinephile, right? And the way that name came about, the way I decided that name for the YouTube channel, is I have friends or people in my life that they know I watch so many movies that they mistakenly might refer to me as a cinephile, and I don't like identify as a cinephile at all. And if you want to say I'm a cinephile, then I am the world's worst one, because there's so many classic films, iconic films, that I just haven't seen, and a lot of the movies I watch are bad films that don't necessarily, seeing that movie doesn't give you the cinephile tag, right? Um, and so there's these three franchises this year, that I haven't seen any of the previous films in their franchises. Um, but I'm still, because I know those franchises are so good, so excited to watch not only the upcoming one, but all of the ones leading up to it as well. So without further ado, 10, 9, and 8. Number 10 is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Number 9, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. And number 8 is Paddington in Peru. So again, those are three films that I haven't seen any of the films leading up to in their franchises, but I'm very excited to get to all of those leading up to those three as well. So those three, I think, deserve a spot on this list. Number 7 is Inside Out 2. I didn't see Inside Out when it came out originally in 2015, 2014. I'm not 100% sure what year Inside Out came out, but I didn't see it back then. I actually saw Inside Out a couple years ago, and I loved it. Hot take, a lot of people really liked Inside Out, and it was one of those films that, like, I at that time when that came out, I didn't really watch a lot of animated films, and so a couple years ago I went through and I was rewatching a lot of the old, especially like Disney like animated films from the last decade or so that I'd missed, and Inside Out was probably the one that just stood out the most. Now I know there is a little bit of, I don't want to say controversy, but I know there is some discussion with Inside Out 2 where it's kind of a different cast. Some of the cast, the previous cast members didn't come back. And so I think it is going to be a little different, and I'm not anticipating to like it as much as I liked the first Inside Out, but I do think it has a chance to be a good movie, and so it is one that I am anticipating this year. Number 6 is Deadpool 3. Now, obviously, 2023, a lot of the wide discussion over the year of 2023 was kind of the death of superhero movies, or just kind of the death of the excitement and the anticipation that a lot of people have for superhero movies, and I do think that is fair. It was a lot of bad to mediocre superhero movies last year, but going into 2024, especially if you're just looking at the MCU, Deadpool 3 is kind of the only one on the calendar. Obviously, Marvel, the Sony umbrella, has a lot of Spider-Man stuff coming out that I am not very anticipating very much. But Deadpool 3, I think I'm still super excited for it for a couple reasons. Part of it being that I was in my early 20s, when Deadpool 1 came out, so I was kind of in that demographic of I fell in love with the humor. I liked Deadpool. I like Deadpool 2, I think, a lot more than a lot of people do. I still really liked that one. And so Deadpool 3 is just one that, I'm interested to see the story. I'm interested to see, kind of how they're integrating Deadpool and Logan, the Wolverine, just all the characters that they're bringing back, how they're going to integrate them all into the MCU, and I think that Deadpool 3 is one of those that, even if the story does kind of suck, I think there maybe is a possibility that maybe it continues the trend of just these bad scripts in superhero movies. Even if that's the case, I still think that it has enough going for it with the humor and with the previous two, how much I like those. I still think that there's enough for me to be excited into whatever Deadpool 3 ends up becoming. Number 5, most anticipated for next year, is Saw 11. My history with the Saw franchise is I didn't see any of the first 7. And then back in 2016, I think, is when Jigsaw came out. I had a buddy and his girlfriend at the time that they were like, "Oh, let's go see it." And so I was like, "Sure, why not?" Back then that was kind of exclusively what I watched, was like horror and comedy were kind of the two the two genres that I watched. And so I was excited to go see it. So I went and saw it with them, and I remember thinking there was so much about it that I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, or I like this, or that's a cool twist. Mainly the twist of the trap plot and the cop plot not being like on the same timeline. And I remember thinking that was so cool. And so then when Spiral came out a couple years later, I finally went through and watched the whole franchise. I think I'd seen the original Saw already at that point, but I hadn't seen any of the sequels 2 through 7. So I watched the whole franchise, and then I realized how much of Jigsaw already kind of existed in the Saw franchise, of kind of differing timelines and group traps and things like that. A lot of that already kind of existed within the Saw franchise, so it kind of brought down my love of Jigsaw a little bit. But the Saw franchise was just fun and unique, and it's one of the more unique franchises in the sense of there's some films, 1, 2, 6 that I really like, and then there's a lot, like, or a couple, 5 and 7 that I really don't like. So Saw has this unique area of a wide range of outcome of how good the quality of the film might be, and so that's why going into last year, Saw X, Saw 10 was one that I wasn't really anticipating much. And then I ended up kind of being blown away by it. The idea of making John Kramer the protagonist of Saw 10, I think, was an excellent idea, and it really kind of brought new life, I think, to this franchise that I had kind of thought was dead for a little bit. I didn't think there was anything really new that they could do, or they had just kind of run out or run the entire idea, just had run it dry, and there wasn't a lot left that you could say or any stories you could tell. So that switch that they made in Saw X, I think, has rejuvenated my anticipation for the franchise, and so that's why I think I'm really anticipating Saw 11. Now, granted, there is a very strong possibility that Saw 11 can slip back into the Spiral, Jigsaw 5 and 7 area, as opposed to 1, 2, 6, and 10 that are like good. But so we'll see. I think I don't know how good it's going to be, but I can just say that because of Saw 10, I am very much anticipating Saw 11. My number 4 most anticipated film for next year is Ballerina, the Ana de Armas-led film that is set in the John Wick universe. I think my history with John Wick was I didn't see the first two, and then in 2019 was kind of the year that I really was getting into going and seeing a ton of movies, stretching my tastes beyond just horror and comedy, and so I was really excited when I saw the trailer for John Wick 3 Parabellum, and so that was one that I went back and I watched the original, the first and the second, and I just fell in love with the franchise, and then obviously 4 last year was so good, and so it's just one of those franchises where every single film is good, and so it makes me like there's no way I can't be excited for a spin-off within the franchise. I don't know what Keanu Reeves and everyone, I don't know what their all involvement is going to be in the story, but just setting it in the same universe, and then you gave us one scene in No Time to Die where Ana de Armas is a spy, gets that action scene, and so just seeing that was enough for me to be like, okay, Ballerina, an action scene with Ana de Armas just set in the John Wick universe. And I love the previous 4 films in the franchise. That's enough for me to be, all in on Ballerina. My number 3 most anticipated film is A Quiet Place Day 1. Now, A Quiet Place, the first one, is one of my favorite films of, if not, I don't think it was my favorite, but I think it was like a top 3 favorite film of 2018, I believe, is when that one came out. I loved the first one. It was such a cool concept, and it was one of those things that, it just completely caught me off guard with how good it was. I think, it's one of those films, every now and then there's some movies that come out where you see the trailer and you think like, oh, maybe, it's kind of an interesting concept, but you don't expect it to be super good. Maybe that's kind of how I felt with A Quiet Place when it came out, but then I just instantly, I loved the film. And when Quiet Place Part 2 came out a couple years later, I know a lot of people were kind of off on it, didn't like it as much. I know some people liked it more than the first one, but I still think I liked the second one quite a bit more than other people did. So that just leaves me excited for Quiet Place not part three, day one, starring Lupita Nyong'o. So I'm kind of interested to see, because the thing about A Quiet Place that works really well is obviously you had John Krasinski and Emily Blunt and their family, and you have that storyline. But the thing that's so cool about The Quiet Place is it sets up an entire world. There's an entire universe being created with the concept of this movie, to where it's kind of the same as like the Purge movies, where you don't have to follow the same characters. Every movie could be kind of like its own standalone film. It could be its own thing where it's telling you the story of a different family. It's telling you the story of completely different characters, and I think it would be entertaining. So I'm excited to see, for kind of the first time in day one, seeing the story that's not the family we've been following for the first two movies, being able to kind of see Lupita Nyong'o and what her character and what her family, or I don't know much about the plot, but just interested to follow a new group of characters set within the Quiet Place universe, I think is exciting. My number two most anticipated movie of next year was, if I'm not mistaken, was my number two most anticipated movie of 2023, and that is Dune Part 2. Dune, I don't remember exactly, when it came out in 2021, I don't remember exactly. I believe that was the year that HBO Max, that Warner Brothers was doing like day and you could go to the theater, but you could also watch it on HBO Max. I want to say that I think that was still the same year, and so I remember that being a thing that I was thinking, oh, I'll just, I wasn't super excited about Dune back then, so I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll just watch it, on HBO Max. So, I'll get a buddy's password or something and find it. But I remember then there was just one day that I was, didn't have anything going on, and I was like, I've heard a lot of great things about Dune, and playing in IMAX, I was like, I feel like that's the proper way. That was the way that Denis Villeneuve was wanting people to see his film, and so I decided to go see Dune in IMAX, and obviously I loved it. It's a film that I haven't actually gone back and I think maybe I watched it one more time after seeing it in the theaters, but it's been a couple years since I've watched it, and so I'm very excited to again just check out the Dune Part 1, and then go into Dune Part 2. It's a seeing the one thing, obviously, if you saw my first two videos on this channel, one thing I'm very interested in is the Oscars and the Academy Awards, and obviously Dune, the first one, it won pretty much every technical category. It was sweeping, editing, visual effects, production design, everything, all of the sound, score, all these technical categories. Dune is it's a masterclass in, and so it's one of those that, like, it's a good story, it's a good script if you're into that, but it's also it's a visual treat. It's a feast, when you go and when you watch it, and so I'm just very excited, and luckily it's not going to be, fingers crossed, it's not going to get delayed again, so hopefully we're only a couple months out from being able and going seeing Dune Part 2. But my number one most anticipated film for next year, it's interesting, there's kind of a trend I noticed when I was making my list. Number 10, or 2 through 10, they're all sequels or follow-ups, within a franchise. They're all franchise films, and so number one is the only one that kind of stands out on its own as not part of a franchise, and that is Mickey 17. Now, my most anticipated films, the way that a film becomes the most, at least a top 10 most anticipated for me, it's one of two categories of where it is either part of a big franchise, and so I've obviously seen previous installments, and so that's why I'm anticipating to see the next chapter, to see the next part of the story, or the other category, where Mickey 17 falls into, is because I love the filmmaker. And there are certain filmmakers that, obviously when I saw Parasite back in 2019, I think maybe I had heard of Snowpiercer at that point, but I hadn't seen it, and so Parasite just completely blew my mind, and it just instantly made me a fan of Bong Joon-ho, to the point that whatever he made going forward, I obviously was going to be there day one. I was going to go see it in the theaters, and so, and that's kind of how, like my most anticipated of 2023 list was kind of the same with Barbie for Greta Gerwig. Anything Greta Gerwig makes, I'll go see. Christopher Nolan with Oppenheimer, anything he makes, I'll go see. Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon was on my most anticipated. and so yeah, that's kind of the two ways a film can make my most anticipated is it being a part of a franchise, or I love the filmmaker and it's something that I will see anything that they make, and so very excited for Mickey 17. I know I believe it's based on a book. I haven't read the book. I don't know anything about the book, and part of that is by design because I don't want to know anything about this film going into it. Kind of the same way I knew nothing about Parasite when I saw that for the in theaters for the first time, and so I'm looking to go into Mickey 17. I think the only thing other than Bong Joon Ho, the only parts that I really know, Robert Pattinson, Stephen Yeun, Naomi Aki. I think Mark Ruffalo's in it. I think Tony Collette. I could be mixing up a couple movies here, but it's just one of those things that anything Bong Joon Ho makes, I'm going to be very excited, and so that's why Mickey 17 is at the top of my most anticipated list for 2024. So that's it. That's the list. If there's any films that I didn't mention, or if I did mention a film that you're interested in as well, let me know in the comments below. Just comment any films that you're most excited to look for in 2024. It is also worth mentioning. I in prepping, kind of putting my list together on Letterboxd, I was looking at multiple websites and trying to figure out all the movies that are supposed to be coming out in 2024. And on pretty much every website, they all had Beyond the Spider-Verse listed. That 100% would probably be my number one. That would be my most anticipated of the year. I am so confident that that's not actually coming out in 2024. That's going to be delayed to 25, 26, and I'm totally okay with it. I am so willing to wait just to make sure that that film is exactly as Phil Lord and Christopher Miller and everyone involved is the way that they intend for that film to be. So I'm totally fine with waiting. But if there's any other films that I missed, or if you look at my the list I made on Letterboxd, if you see any films that I just don't even have in like the group of 80 plus, it's very possible that there's things I've missed. Almost guaranteed that there's things I've missed. So if you look at that and there's any other films that I haven't mentioned or put in that list that you want to let me know about, feel free to comment them below. I will read any comment and look into any of those films and see if it's something that I'm anticipating as well. So thank you for sticking and watching this video, and I hope you have a very happy new year.